Hey, good afternoon and welcome to today's online seminar where we're going to be exploring process automation and how it can help drive efficiency in contact centres and in contact centre customer experience. And it's thanks to Netcall and our amazing panellists for enabling us to bring this conversation to life. I'm Lee Hopwood, I'm the CEO here at the CCMA and I'm going to be hosting today's session. So as always, this session is interactive. So if you have any questions or comments, please do use the chat or the Q&A and we will bring those thoughts in as we go. Just so that you're aware, I just want to make you aware that this session will not be made available afterwards. So hopefully you can all hear me okay. So with the current economic situation, the pressure is on, is it not only to continue to improve customer experiences delivered by the contact centre, but to do this more efficiently and more cost effectively. Oh my goodness, the pressure's on. So there are many things that contact centre leaders can do to really make a difference. And automation is a really obvious solution. But this is a big topic. So to help us explore what's possible, I'd first like to introduce Richard Farrell, who is the CIO at Netcall, to join me on screen. Richard, welcome.
Hi, Lee.
Welcome. So, Richard, I want to start by asking you the big question. What do we mean by process automation?
Okay, it's a great question. Process automation refers to the use of technology to perform tasks that would otherwise be done by humans. And this can be linking data from multiple systems, allocating tasks to workers, moving cases through a process. The goal of process automation is to increase efficiency and reduce errors, and it allows employees to focus on more complex and value-adding tasks.
Perfect. So my next big question is, what's the difference between that and robotic process automation?
Okay, so robotic process automation, RPA from now on, is a type of process automation that uses software robots, often with AI capabilities, to perform tasks that would normally be done by humans. RPA software is designed to mimic the actions of human workers, such as navigating through applications, logging in and out of systems, entering data. So the tasks can include simple data entry and processing, as well as more complex tasks. And the goal of RPA is to automate repetitive time-consuming tasks of workers, allowing human employees again to focus on higher value-added work.
And I am going to ask you the big question, why now? And I'm so aware of the many conversations I have, that the conversations that advisors and agents are having on the front line are so much more complex, so much more sophisticated than they once were. And the technology is obviously taking away some of the more mundane conversations and simple queries. But why now, Richard? Why is it becoming so important right now?
I think there are a variety of factors that are coming together. One is the technology is maturing, so it makes it easier to deploy, simpler, more cost effective. But the business reasons are customer experience is a priority right across industries. Costs are under pressure, but also employees require more satisfying work. So we've got this real mix of factors, and really the automating and removing mundane tasks is going to be one of the key ways that we can address all of these issues. We can speed up delivery and improve service, improve accuracy. We can keep costs down, but also we can keep employees more satisfied as well.
That's all such a good thing. Richard, I know you've got more that you can share on the subject before we bring our panelists in. So Richard, if you'd like to start sharing your slides, and then I'm going to leave it with you for a moment.
Okay, thanks very much. So hopefully we can see a PowerPoint slide.
Yes, we can, Richard.
Fantastic. That's always the acid test, isn't it? We were just joking beforehand, 3 years into this, and we're still trying to work out how Zoom is working. I think they keep changing it on us. So yeah, to put it all into context, customer experience is vital because it directly impacts the bottom line. As we know, happy customers are more likely to stay loyal, purchase more products and services, and recommend businesses to others. And in contrast, poor CX can lead to customer churn, negative word of mouth. And the contact center plays a critical role in the overall customer service experience, often the first point of contact for customers seeking assistance or support. And the contact center is typically responsible for managing customer interactions, providing timely and accurate information, and resolving issues. So really important in terms of customer journeys. It can set the tone for journeys right throughout an organization. And as the front line, it has a direct impact on satisfaction and loyalty. It also provides valuable insights into customer needs and preferences as well. So contact centers are absolutely critical for customer experience, but we don't make it easy for everybody working there. And partly this is historic, and we've got loads of legacy systems and processes that are still about. This is some data from CCMA, and it was a recent survey post-pandemic, and it's asking agents and managers about sources of friction in the contact center and which activities are the most time consuming. It's a US piece of research. I think they're typically a couple of years ahead of us in terms of technology maturity. And they are also very black and white in terms of how they define roles in contact centers or call centers. They call them agents. Anyway, as we can see at the bottom there, the big drains on time are routine or mundane customer interactions and routine or mundane administrative tasks. And so these highlight good targets for investing in knowledge management solutions and also increased automation of routine customer service activities. I read some Gartner research just last week. They report that on average, a customer service representative needed 7 systems to do their job well, 3 to 4 systems to handle typical issues end to end, and 5 to handle a difficult issue end to end. And automating activities can help improve agent retention by reducing the repetitive and monotonous tasks that agents have to perform. So as we discussed at the start, there are multiple benefits in here. Now, I don't want to make this too simplistic. And obviously we've got a wide range of knowledge in the audience, but we're just trying to keep this conceptual and show where different sorts of technologies may fit in to this landscape. On the left here, we have our customer or citizen or tenant or patient, and they want resolution. They want quick resolution, consistent answers, 24/7. And of course, we've got multiple channels. Traditional phone, most contact centers still 60 or 70% of volume. Forms, SMS, chat and chatbot. Chatbot, of course, can deflect some interactions from going to employees. And then we've got email. We can add every other channel that comes along in here as well. Ways of customers wanting to interact. So WhatsApp, social media, could be a car or an IoT device, a smart meter. There are lots and lots of channels of information that send requests, queries, questions into organizations. And typically we wrap these up in some sort of contact center type technology. If we're lucky, we have omni-channel routing. Omni-channel here to an employee rather than multi-channel just to a contact center agent. Increasingly, more and more individuals within organizations, often in traditional back office roles, knowledge workers, are handling customer interactions. And of course, with the pandemic and more remote working and hybrid work, the traditional contact center employee sitting at a row of desks handling traditional contact center calls is changing over time. And smart organizations also use the same sorts of technologies to route interactions to employees throughout the organization as well. So we will call it omni-channel here. And then we have multiple disparate systems that we ask our employee to talk about. I've just mentioned the Gartner research, and I've put case management here. This could be CRM or patient administration system or service management or IT service desk, a system to manage customer records and interactions, typically the sort of core application that the employee is using. And then we also have loads of other systems and updates that are required by employees. And if we do it really well, we link that back and we report that update back to the customer. So this is just our simple view of the world today. Now, to really thrive and to deliver the best value to customers through service and support, there are a number of actions that organizations are prioritizing. One is to adopt a self-service dominant mindset. Another is to make it easy to provide value-add customer service through a connected agent desktop. So this is our single pane of glass that I've put on the screen. And another factor is to collect and action customer data to improve decision-making across the organization. So there are a few objectives that we have. And so there are some areas where automation technologies can help. So I've dropped in intelligent automation and machine learning. So this is where we have technologies that often include machine learning to provide data, information, and engagement. Platforms here can integrate with disparate sources of data and provide insight for customers and employees. And this can help improve efficiency and productivity. So by adding intelligent automation and ML in this area, we can provide information to customers to better inform chatbots. And increasingly, organizations are using some form of customer portal. And we see a lot of success with customer portals being built on low-code application platforms. So low-code application platforms are a form of automation technology. They're really good at integrating with other systems. They allow for rapid development, quite easy to use, don't require an awful lot of technical expertise, and they're highly customizable as well. So we see a lot of use of automation technologies to link up to different systems and to provide information to customers, more relevant and timely information. And those factors can contribute to a better customer experience and reduce costs. And then we also have robotic process automation. And we'll go back to the contact center. For the contact center, this can provide a number of benefits. One of the main benefits is improved customer experience through faster and more accurate service. So RPA can automate repetitive tasks such as data entry, freeing up agents to focus on more complex and valuable interactions. And it's also important to note that RPA and other automation technologies can be beneficial for contact center agents as well. So by removing those repetitive and mundane tasks, agents can spend time on higher value activities and have more satisfying work experiences. Now we've dropped in a few other bits of technology into the slide here. We've now got a knowledge base as well. And of course, in a mature organization, there's a whole load of other bits and pieces in here. Quality assurance, analytics, a wide range of different technologies, workforce engagement management, quality assurance, and so on. But again, we're keeping it quite simplistic and we're looking at processes here. So what we can also do is we can apply the technologies for the creation of custom automation solutions that can be tailored to the specific needs of the organization. And this is where we can start to automate the handling of complex customer queries. There is added potential for automation to drive wider transformation to digital business, such as the use of omni-channel strategies and the integration of customer engagement solutions across various touch points. So we can use automation technologies in a number of ways, but it's not going to be one size fits all. It is going to be dedicated, and to get the best results, it's going to be customized for your processes and your organization. There's not a piece of software that you'll be able to buy off the shelf that just fits in. Forrester Research have quite a nice expression. They say software is an expression of the business. And so to enable this, developers must build software that leads to customer obsession or facing increasing pressures to quickly deliver digital capabilities. And I've got a brief case study that I'd just like to mention, absolutely on topic. ATS Euromaster, familiar brand, and they've transformed their B2B customer experience from sign up and credit checks to welcoming customers as trade ready with an application that was built on Liberty Create, a low code platform. And they use the platform to automate and control process flow and RPA to enhance processes. The platform integrates 3 previously isolated systems. And David Robson is the ISIT director at ATS Euromaster, and he makes a number of important points. He says, along with the real efficiency and cost benefits, we're especially pleased by the professionalism that the app provides to customers. So this is on the experience side of things. They started off with the time and motion study on processes, and they found 15 different processes they could automate. In just one of those processes, they were spending 26.5 hours a day copying data from one system to another. And one thing that was really important for ATS Euromaster was to think about the quality of life of their employees. David says, we don't have infinite resources. We've only got a certain amount of time with people. And the important thing is about getting those people to do the important stuff. The goal for us is to free up our team through these automation tools so our people can do things they are best suited for, leaving the highly repetitive tasks to the robots who do not get bored or tired. So my little summary here is that a combination of engagement technologies and process automation is necessary for contact centers to thrive in the future. By implementing automation technologies, contact centers can improve customer experience, increase efficiency, and provide more satisfying work experiences for agents.
Thank you so much. There we go. Thank you so much, Richard. And it's really good to hear how ATS has transformed their processes and how they started. So obviously anybody that wants to ask a question or has any comments on what you've heard so far, please do share them in the chat or on the Q&A, and feel free to ask your questions and have your say through the chat as we go. So I can see that a question has already come in, and I will come to you, Dan, in a moment. But first of all, let me introduce the rest of the panel while Richard works out how to stop screen sharing. So hopefully, Richard, you can see a button somewhere that says stop screen sharing.
Found it.
Fabulous. So coming onto the screen now, we have Neris Caulfield, who is a contact center consultant who, Neris, this is how I've described you, you focus on bridging the gap between the technology and the operation for the benefit of all.
Actually, yeah, that is perfect.
Is that good? And we also have Phil Quickenden, who is Head of Customer and Registration Services at the London Borough of Camden.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, Phil. And we have Atif, sorry, I said that wrong, Atif Rashid, who is part of the CX consulting practice at Go Beyond, where you have designed and implemented multiple process automation initiatives across a whole variety of sectors. So we have a great panel of folk that are really well equipped to answer some of the questions. Now, I am, as much as the panel knows that we have a lineup of questions that we will work through, I am going to jump straight onto the Q&A and start there. So how is it best to measure the value of automation? Atif, I'm going to fire that one at you.
Thank you very much, Lee, and great to meet you all, guys. So good afternoon. There's lots of metrics which tend to be focused around purely cost, but there is a value overarch in comparison to some of those kind of core metrics. The typical you find is very much in the process time or the process length in performing certain tasks. Now, what we've found certainly within our business, the low value, high volume demand, some of the points that Richard raised, they're quite quick and easy to measure against an FTE saving or a process or a handle time saving. But then overarching to say, actually, there might be certain type of demands where we don't want to necessarily automate and reduce because they drive revenue, they drive value. It might be a retention in the FS or retail space. So I think for us, the hard and fast measure tends to be driven through cost, but without having to not really forget about the value piece. But on the flip side, it's not just around the agent experience or the agent cost within our contact centers, but also from a customer CX point of view, as a route to entry, and Richard mentioned omni-channel, whether it be voice, chat bots, email, or other channels. How do we measure that entire CX journey from cradle to grave? And then overarching a similar metric from a quality perspective, as well as the cost and value. So the new range, and this could be because the investment to automate, investment to rip and replace technology might be greater than it would be to maybe introduce some automation around some of those processes, which are probably simpler and quicker to deploy. So I think the metrics question around RPA, it's not just RPA, it's also about process orchestration. Because within that, as you do the design and discovery phase, there might be process, procedures, and policies that you may automatically change, which already inherently drive some value towards that kind of business case. So there's a couple of kind of moving component parts within that question.
Perfect. Thank you, Atif. And Richard, there's another question that's come through, and it's regarding the ATS case study. What was the biggest challenge that ATS faced when implementing RPA? Oh, and you're currently on mute, Richard.
Yeah, 3 years. One of the biggest challenges, and one that they really talk about, is they headed it off, which was a cultural challenge. They wanted to make sure that the employees, the staff, were on board with this, that they didn't see that the robots were threatening their jobs. So that was a really important factor. So massive stakeholder involvement, getting everybody involved, and even naming the bots as well to personalize them. So they headed off what they perceived would be the biggest challenge by including the stakeholders, and it was a cultural one, not a technology one.
Perfect. Thank you, Richard. Now, Neris, I'm going to come back to you, and I can see that there's lots of questions coming in, and some of them do reflect to how you go about bringing RPA into an organisation. And I guess that does come back to the question we put right at the top: is why now? Neris, why now? And maybe being able to respond to some of the questions as you go.
Why now? Well, because the technology is available now, and it is available in with great depth and agility as well. So, the winter of AI is very much gone, and we're very much in the spring and summer now. So AI and RPA, cloud apps, all of those things make this agility much, much easier to deploy. So that's the why those solutions now should be very much part of the thinking. And also because of the amount of pain that businesses are going through. So the amount of pain that advisors are going through, you should be recruiting them, to Richard's point, to just do the job that you want them to do, not to mess around keying here and, processing here and all of that side of things, just to talk, interact, support and service customers, because the customers are going through, friction enhancing experiences, and because, to Atif's point, this is a commercial decision to drive automation, and it is the right decision, and there's still lots of gaps and opportunities to improve processes through automation. So yeah, businesses commercially have to make some real investment into making it frictionless for the customer and the agent.
And there's clearly, and as Atif alluded to right at the start there are clearly a huge amount of benefits that automation can bring. You talked about the cost benefits, but what can really be achieved? And yes, there is the bottom line, the metrics, but what impact does it really have on the customer because fundamentally that's one of the top priorities, but also on colleagues and ultimately business, Atif.
Yeah, I mean, the CX design is by far the most paramount component before you even start the journey of doing RPA. Because there's a couple of things. I will contradict my first initial statement. So from a customer's perspective, the one size fits all doesn't work. And I think we've all tried this. We've all tried to force somebody down a particular route, a particular channel. Also failure demand, which tends to be some of the core components, which result in probably badly designed and badly ran automation projects. So I think from a customer's perspective, segmentation is extremely important, especially around the demographics of that business type and the business customer, but also tailoring the channel of choice and still offering that up as a potential. But a lot of the automation tooling, and I've noticed some of the questions around integration, proof of concept, can it integrate to kind of the more industry enterprise type applications. RPA traditionally was very much in the back office space. Well, actually, we can now incorporate some of the methodologies and capabilities in the front office, but where we think about self-serve type inquiries. So we keep saying low value and high value demand. If I think about retail, where is my order? Simple order inquiries, which can now be automated through the orchestration layer. So I think from a customer lens, tailoring the experience is extremely important because lifetime value, brand perception, return business, those are kind of core components. And they're the metrics which are quite easily measurable in terms of from a kind of KPI perspective. But on the colleague side, in terms of my contradiction, the future of the agent is going to change. We're not going to have necessarily a call center agent, it'll be a call center specialist. So if we start to remove some of the simple and automated tasks, what you're left with is all of the complex type of activity. So where there's a traditional handle time, there will be an inherent increase in that particular space. So having AHT as a measure of success isn't always the right thing to do, assuming you're not in an isolated or siloed department. But it's great though. I mean, I think somebody's raised a question on knowledge base. Knowledge base is fine in its current shape and form, which is articles, keyword search. But we're now moving to a position where even in our business, using orchestration, using automation, you can provide contextual next best action type knowledge. So it's more specific to where you are within that journey rather than just a general knowledge SharePoint dump. So I think the way we now design the interactions is quite critical, and the technology is an enabler, not necessarily a dependency, and it allows you to kind of unlock some of those capabilities.
Thank you, Atif. Phil, let me bring you into this conversation. Now, you're a seasoned contact centre professional. You've got a history of working in council and emergency services, contact centre and control rooms. What's your view on why now, and what processes do you see that are really better enabled with automation in your environment?
Yes, so the why now question I think is a really pertinent one, particularly so from a local government point of view, we've got a really big why now. I'm not normally a fan of sequels, and I think Austerity 2 is probably going to be worse than Austerity 1. So from that perspective, you know, we're really thinking about how do we become as efficient as possible, how do we streamline that journey, but also the people narrative that comes through austerity in terms of, you know, we've got a cost of living crisis. We're seeing people with exceptionally acute needs now presenting to the council much later than they perhaps would have done pre-COVID with more significant needs. So we're looking at how can we service those people in the best possible way. And those conversations for my agents are really quite challenging, time-consuming conversations to unpick and understand somebody's circumstances to help them on their journey. And so anything that we can do process-wise that creates capacity within the system for those staff to do what they do best, you know, to use the robots to enhance the people and give them the time to make the best use of those skills that we've recruited them for, is absolutely paramount to us at the moment. And I think, you know, spreading that across other industries, we've seen through the pandemic that we can work in this more enhanced virtual way, that we can unlock this capacity. And actually we're starting to build expectations now. You know, people coming knocking on our door saying, we can't seem to find the web chat function on your website, what's gone wrong? We haven't got one yet. It's not a good answer. So, you know, I think organizations are having to step up towards customer expectation, as well as kind of, you know, the challenges of working against efficiency and everything else. In terms of where I've seen that work really effectively, my previous role in Suffolk County Council, we did a lot of work around RPA during the pandemic, and that was all about stripping out some really manual, time-consuming tasks from staff. We had an inbox that received 50,000, it felt like 50,000 different automated responses from referrals from different partners. And the most soul-destroying job, I think, in the entire council was the poor person who managed that inbox and manually transferred all that information into our case management system. And kind of pretty much overnight, by turning on the robot, we stripped 85% of that demand out. And whereas I was seeing a pattern of people like phoning in sick when it was their day on the inbox, that just stopped overnight. People were really enjoying that task because it wasn't kind of monotonous and repetitive. So I think there are some really good high volume case studies out there now for where automation can really improve people's journeys.
Thank you, Phil. Neris, I want to come to you with one of the questions that's on the Q&A. How would you prioritise which processes you should automate first, and what would you leave for later?
Well, I suppose that all comes down to the discovery phase. So really looking at where you're where you're losing a lot of time. So operational leakage, where is it coming from? Just basic indicators like what's your ACW? So like Atif said, nobody wants to look at AHT anymore within the contact center and drive that down. But ACW is an indicator of a lot of after work, after call processing that has to be undertaken as a consequence of the complexities of different systems, the amount of keying that has to be done. So that's a good metric to have a look at, as well as, hold time transfer rates as well can be indicators. But the reality is you can only automate processes that are very clearly defined. If you've got exceptions to that, it will start to break. So again, it's understanding some of the processes that are a bit admin time as a disposition as well. Sorry, that's another indicator. Advisors taking themselves out of available and into admin or whatever that equivalent is. And that's not to manage digital interactions. That is to do back office work when you have, recruited them for their skills and to be able to manage customers. So I think that looking at those two metrics and then understanding which are the processes that are so clearly defined, which are the workflows that have got key points across it, and then thinking, right, how do I automate these and how can I make the business case to invest in determining that this is something that we definitely want to embrace and see value in.
Perfect. That's really good advice, Neris. Thank you. And it's interesting watching some of the questions that are coming through, and questions around, where does it work? Where is it really making an impact? So, Richard, I'm going to come to you first, and then I am going to come to Neris and Atif to further this conversation. But where have you seen it really work? What are the kind of benefits that you've seen as a result of that?
Okay. So we've got quite a long experience in process automation, and we have seen successes right across sectors and with a massive variety in scale. So as you might expect, financial services quite early adopters of any sort of technology, and long-running mortgage application processes were the first ones that were really delivering great value. And the key one there was around customer experience. So it's about proactive communication rather than reactive. And rather than having to wait for something in the post, you get a text message with where you are in the process stage. But we've also seen that right down to really short processes. So activities, much shorter insurance claims, for example, that can be quite transactional. And then when we get into Phil's world in local government, we are looking at literally dozens of processes where there have been successes. And these are right across every sort of engagement that you might have with your local council. So blue badges, noise pollution, mist bins, potholes, it's really interesting. We can see the adoption of the different solutions really tell you what the local government priorities are in each area. Kensington and Chelsea, it was noise pollution for the Ferraris. I don't know what Phil's top targets are at the moment. So right across, and as I say, benefits are very wide. There are tangible process and productivity benefits. Just in terms of what Neris was saying about the design, we often find that this is an opportunity for our customers to actually redesign the process a bit. So don't just, we used to have somebody who was quite vociferous who said, I will share it, don't automate a crap process. Now, the technology means you can do that. And I mean, some would argue that you could use RPA to get benefit from automating crap processes, but most of our customers do redesign and think about the journeys at this sort of stage. So they know that they can use the automation technologies throughout journeys, but what should the journeys be rather than just, we do this now. Health was another really interesting one, especially during the pandemic. Health was traditionally about going somewhere. But if you can't go somewhere, what do? You have to redesign that process. So you get remote appointments, you get virtual waiting rooms, you get all sorts of new uses of the technology. So everywhere you can automate, everywhere where there are people performing tasks, there's an opportunity to improve.
Neris, where have you seen it work? So I know you go into lots of different organisations. Are there any specific processes that you've seen really work?
I think that really the focus thus far has been on the self-service side of things and less the RPA side, because that very much has been a back office. Now, I have worked in organisations where we're cutting across the back office, and to Richard's point, finance is a real classic example of that, where there's real onerous processes in that case management role. So I think it's worked really well in there, but specifically around RPA, it's just sort of nudging its head really into the front end contact center to work around the AI side of things, the self-service automation, you know. So yeah, it's exciting. I certainly judge businesses on it, and Johnson & Johnson have written about their £500 million saving that they've created through RPA. So automating the thousands of things that were evidentially able to be automated. And now the business has said to them, right, you were supposed to do that within 3 years. You've done it within less time than that. We want to see another 2 times that £500 million saving. So, you know, that is a massive business, of course, but we are seeing much, you know, smaller marginal gains happening in lots of different sectors.
Interesting. I'm going to come on to Phil to understand a little bit more about his experiences in a moment. Atif, have you got anything to add to what Richard and Neris have said around specific processes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think without naming brands, because we can't, the 3 sectors certainly around travel tourism, financial services and retail to an extent. So if I think about travel, certainly during the pandemic period, with disruption, delays, cancellations, various guises, the claims processing, which is a regulatory thing right across Europe, not just within the UK business, it's actually automating the entire claims process. And that's orchestration with lots of RPA things sitting in the back end. And there's some questions around integration. Certainly nowadays, in the absence of APIs, there's lots of things you can do, mini bots, microservices they can sit on top of, they can sit behind. And it allowed us to not only design, but also build out a proof of concept, or certainly a minimal viable product, just to showcase across one particular market. And it's a major European airline for one particular market, and the value in not only just reducing or removing the demand, but it also is to improve the process time for some of those claims, as well as right the way through to fulfillment. So that's a great example. In financial services, really, really interesting, based on cost of living, and especially during the pandemic period again, vulnerable customers or customers who are about to go through some form of financial distress, being able to contact a bank or that financial service to process affordability assessments, having mortgage breaks. And I think most would have gone through some form of interaction of some shape in the last 2 to 3 years, but it's automating certain tasks. So that's not complete automation. That's a hybrid of the two that says we will try and almost triage and provide a concierge front end to gather lots of information, and then it gets passed on to somebody who can provide you that personalized experience. So rather than spending an hour on the call, it's a 15-20 minutes conversation, but to get to a decision, that 45 minutes has now been replaced by RPA, automation, orchestration, and trying to gather what you can up front. So there's lots of interesting use cases in retail. That there's a plethora: order-related inquiries, supply chain, refunds, returns, and especially through the pandemic period where you couldn't physically take a returns to a shop. Actually, what can I do now from home? And there's lots of cases we've built out from a design and implementation perspective. So there's infinite use cases in this particular space.
Interesting, thank you, Atif. And Phil, I want to come to you. You're in the space that many of our listeners will be in. You know, they're not the technology provider. They are the person that's responsible for bringing about change within the contact centre, which is where you sit. So, what processes have you seen that really work? But there are surely a shed load of pitfalls that you can fall into. And it'd be really good to get your advice there. And just to throw a third question into that mix, Phil, there is a question on the chat that is, what is the opportunity for a group of separate organisations that should have the same processes to collaborate? Now, I'm suspecting that that's a similar kind of environment to where you're in.
Yeah, so I'll probably start with that question first, actually. So I think, if you imagine a local government setup, we are lots of different organisations with different systems. We just happen to have the same payroll at the end of it. So we kind of work in that environment already. So if you imagine one of my contact centre agents could access somewhere between 60 and 75 different systems as part of their day-to-day role. So, you know, from back office council tax to booking pest control appointments through to social care diaries, that kind of thing. So it's a really disparate organisation from that regard. And so actually a lot of our process work will be about doing exactly that. How can we align lots of different systems with different data requirements and use the process automation to link all of that information together, particularly in a way that means that the person answering the telephone can see a huge amount of that information and therefore make some sort of judgments about what's going to be best for that individual customer. So I think there's a huge amount of opportunity in that space. I think from our point of view, we're looking at that as part of our prioritization criteria. So we're going through the process that Neris talked about now, in terms of how do we align what are the quick wins for the organisation with a more strategic approach to where do we get to that kind of holistic view of people that we're really, really keen to see. So so I think, you know, where you've got those complex processes with different organisational requirements, that's where perhaps we would lean more towards the RPA approach, where you can automate access to those systems rather than trying to combine things and integrate. And I'm sure Richard will have a view on that as well, probably a more technical and informed view than mine. But back in terms of where are we seeing that working, I think, you know, that's something we're really exploring at the moment is in terms of Camden's use of automation is really drawing on what other people are doing. So that's one of the benefits with working with Netcall is they've got this kind of app store of brilliant automated bits of work other people have already done that we can just go in and steal for free. It's fantastic. I've been playing with that this morning, looking at all the different options there. And there's some really well established products on there. You know, I was at a presentation with Netcall yesterday looking at a register of interest for counsellors. I've seen blue badge processes completely automated, that kind of thing. So really, where do you want to start? I think that's the biggest question organisations are going to face is there's so much potential in automation. Where do you start to get the most out of it?
And so from your experience, Phil, once you've started on that road, and it might be advice that you've had along the way, but what are the biggest pitfalls that you are concerned about, maybe even yourself falling into?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think broken processes, you can try and automate a broken process, but if it's broken before you start, it will still be broken when you've automated it. So I think there's a decision-making process along the way which can tie you up in knots about where do I fix the process I've already got? Can I do that quick enough to automate it now? If I can't, is there a temporary workaround that perhaps RPA can facilitate for me whilst I try and get to that end goal of a fixed process? I've seen multiple times in the public sector, we get as far as we recognise we've got a broken process, let's fix it now temporarily with RPA, and then we'll just leave it there. And so we've still got this complex broken process at the end of it. And as soon as something changes and the robot can't keep up with that change, you're back to square one. So I think, having a timeline that allows you to identify your broken processes, put some workarounds in place, but fix them, and as you move forward with the automation is really important.
Thank you, Phil. And one of the things that you touched on, and you mentioned that Richard might have a more technical response to, but it's not all about technology. You talked about it there. You've got the process. That's not necessarily technology that's driving that. And we all talk about people, process, and technology, and that actually bringing the three together is really, really important. Richard, what have you experienced in the projects that you've worked on around what else is needed when you're looking at the technology, but what else is needed? What else is important?
Yeah, it's terrible as a tech vendor to know that we come last in the list. But yeah, it's either people or process first, and we come last. You can't just buy some technology, cloud service, and expect it to work for you. So we find that organizations that have already thought about centers of excellence or digital teams or some form of structure, not necessarily formally with an IT, very often more business led, but with IT participation is the way to do it. So technology analysts like Gartner might call it a fusion team, but basically it's bringing together the people who are closer to the business, who understand the process and what they're trying to achieve. And then you do need IT. You can't automate without IT. Phil also mentioned about the broken processes there. And again, as a business that delivers automation, we also know that automation isn't always the answer. Sometimes it could be system replacement that you really need. Sometimes it could be integrating systems, and sometimes it's reinventing the process. So it's definitely not just about technology, but that sort of co-ownership and involving stakeholders, the business and IT, that's really what it's all about. Automation is not for IT, and automation is not going to work if the business just tries to do it on its own. It has to be a collaborative effort throughout the organisation. Thank
you, Richard. Now, Neris, I'm going to come to you with one of the questions that's in the Q&A. As an and I'm drawing on your experience of your time in outsourcing. As an outsourced service provider who perhaps don't own the customer journey or CX team, where can RPA help the outsourced provider?
Okay, yeah, interesting. But the reality is, you are the broken processes are very visible to you. The failure demand that is being generated is really clear for you, and you have a choice. Of course, they generally now, because of cloud, the client will dictate solution you're on, but you have a choice as to what that looks like from a UI perspective, a user interface perspective. So there are opportunities there to really clarify in your circle of control which are the bits that you think are driving inefficiency at the moment. And I think Richard picked up on this, and I think Phil, in terms of it's so easy to normalize inefficiency. And that's very much the case in BPOs who feel like they are aligning to the processes that are being dictated. But it's a partnership approach, that relationship. And as such, it should always be looking for continual improvement. And then to Richard's point, I'm working on two clients at the moment, and both of them have got continual improvement managers. And I think that's such a breath of fresh air, having somebody who really is, you know, outside in looking and looking to align all parts of the business and drive that continual improvement and not normalize inefficiency. So as a BPO, there are parts that are in your circle of control that specifically will impact your advisor's experience. And then I think you work with the customer on the other parts as well.
Thank you, Neris. Now, Atif, I know you've been answering some of the questions that have been on the chat, so thank you so much for doing that. But Atif, I want to come to you and ask you, and do you know what, I'm actually going to come to the rest of you and ask the same question. What are the critical success factors? So we know that automation can have an impact. It can improve the lives and efficiency and the financial performance of the contact centre. We know that, but what do you have to get right in order for a process automation program to really, really work?
I'm going to be controversial, and apologies, Richard, because we do a lot of work with Netcall as well in our own business. Technology is not the answer. So, and I think Phil raised a point around business versus IT requirements. Try not to run this as an IT program or an IT project. If it's run by the business and the customer teams, that's certainly the first starting point. Success is understanding the customer journey, the customer design. Is there a contact strategy? Is there a channel strategy? How does that align with brand principles and brand values? Then more importantly, where we keep saying low value, high volume, is that waste or is that actually demand we're more than happy to deal with? And then segmenting the kind of customer lens around what do we define as being self-serve, and what are those where we do want to encourage some conversation taking place. So I think understanding that landscape is by far the critical success factor, but then also underpinning with insights and analytics, because everyone keeps saying, yeah, we'll get a 20% saving and it equates to X. How about we try and quantify that as a number, but also being realistic around the cost investment versus ROI? And before even venturing down the whole RPA and automation route, getting those bases and foundations right first helps the narrative to really exploit and actually execute effectively. And the last point I will raise, which I haven't raised in the previous one, is we keep deploying technology, deploy services to customer facing and agents or colleagues internally, but there is a cognitive view around kind of the behavioral science of things. So how do we nudge people? So if we say we want to be a digital first business, how do we take them from an analog space into the more digital space? But what's the nudge techniques? How do we do signposting? What's the value to the customer? We shouldn't be forcing people down. It becomes a bit of a blind surprise, but there's lots of ways of wording things effectively. What value does the customer have in that interaction by going down the digital route? So I think there's lots of things that sits around the edge, and I call it hygiene, albeit critical. Technology is an enabler. It's a given. Tech is a given nowadays, and we can do most things now. Tech is no longer a limitation, but the design and the effort it takes to get to an effective deployment has to be invested correctly.
Thank you, Atif. Neris, you got anything you want to add to that?
No, yeah, just to amplify that, I think it is all about clarifying and quantifying the path. Where is it that you want to go? And then what are you coming from? What are you moving away from? Qualify and quantify your pain, and make sure that there's a representation across all business parts, because this is going to get hard and people are going to become frustrated across the journey points. And when that vision is really clear and you're trying to continue to work towards it, and you've all bought into that clarity of vision and what it's going to look and feel like when you get there, that makes it so much easier along the way to keep going and keep trying and that side of things. So that's what I'd say.
Thank you, Neris. Richard, for you, what's critical success factor for you?
Yeah, it's I think the stakeholder involvement is really the key one. So customers, citizens, patients, employees, managers, senior management, everybody have their own slightly misaligned outcomes that they want as the object of the engagement or the journey. So it's ensuring that everybody is clear on what the best approach is for all parties. It shouldn't be a surprise, as Atif mentioned about surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that this is happening. It's a continuous journey, and it doesn't stop for the organisation either, because customer expectations are going to increase, and different ways of working. And as we said, there's going to be more channels coming in. Amazon are going to do something else differently that will again notch up what we think about how service should be delivered. So we just have to keep on the journey.
Yeah. Lee, can I just raise one last point, which I think is worthwhile? And by the way, we're not trying to say we've done this perfectly all the time. We've also got lots of lessons learned how not to do it, which I think is always worthwhile. Make sure we adopt that into the future programs. But also try and avoid doing large change programs or large RPA or process orchestration type capabilities. We've got a leap of faith attitude to an extent, and also fail fast. So if you are going to run, because I think if you run lots of little individual programs around small bite-sized initiatives, the sum of those parts is probably greater some of the bigger programs that you might end up running. And what we found also from a value and an ROI perspective, it's always hard to justify the expense on some of the large programs. But it's how do you reinvest? Because we keep saying cost savings. Well, actually, if I make an improvement somewhere, could I redeploy that cost or that resource to do some more value add work elsewhere? It's how do you reapportion the business cases? It's never just a binary, I'll save X amount of money and the finance guys pocket the benefits. Is what can I do with that saving and where does it add value, not just to colleagues, but also our brand and our customers?
Thank you, Atif. Phil, you hearing all this, you're living it. What has been the biggest thing that you've heard here that you're going to take away with you after this call?
I think it's a reminder that we to really get the most out of this, you've got to look at that process end to end, and in doing so, we've got to look at it from the right end to the right end. And I think we have a real habit in local government of looking at the problem from a service perspective, what suits our horrendous back office processes, rather than where's that customer starting from and what gets them the solution they need as soon as possible. So I think for me, it's keeping that end-to-end goal in mind, but very much from a citizen perspective.
Thank you so much, Phil. Now, I'd love to come to everybody in the panel and get your final golden nugget, but we are running out of time. So, Richard, I am going to come straight back to you. And what's your advice? What have you taken from the conversation as well today?
Yeah, well, one thing for me is that we're always having to try and simplify our jargon and language that we're using as vendors. So we'll try harder and harder to remove the jargon from the debate. I think the key thing is to get started. Don't try and think automation has to be a multi-year transformation exercise. It's not a 5-year plan. Think about 5 weeks, 5 months. What can you do? Where are the pain points? Get started.
Thank you so much, Richard. And thank you to everyone that has participated for all of your questions, for all of your comments. We have been reading them as we go, and we've obviously been bringing them into the conversation where we can. So thank you so much. Thank you also to our panelists for sharing all of your experiences and your views, to Richard, to Neris, to Phil, and to Atif. Thank you so much. And a huge thanks also to Netcall for really enabling us to have this conversation. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of the day. We look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you all. Speak soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.